Ace Frehley said nothing. He picked up his guitar. He played a single chord. And Gene Simmons's face changed completely. That moment changed everything. The studio was Record Plant, Los Angeles. 1975. Late afternoon light filtering through the soundproof glass. The smell of cigarette smoke and amplifier tubes. Cables snaking across the floor like veins. 4 men in a room, making the album that would define them. Kiss was already successful. Dressed to Kill had charted. Tours were selling out. The makeup, the fire, the spectacle, it was working. Gene Simmons knew it was working because Gene Simmons knew everything about the business of being Kiss. He knew what the fans wanted. He knew what the label needed. He knew how to turn 4 musicians into a brand, a mythology, an empire. What he didn't know was what Ace Frehley was about to play. They were working on a track. Nothing special yet. Just structure. Bass, drums, rhythm. The bones of a song waiting for something to make it matter. Gene stood near the mixing console, arms crossed, nodding along to the playback. Peter Criss was adjusting his hi-hat. Paul Stanley was tuning his guitar, half listening. Ace sat in the corner, his Gibson Les Paul across his lap. He wasn't tuning. Wasn't practicing. Just sitting. Waiting. The producer, Eddie Kramer, a man who had worked with Hendrix, who knew what guitar genius sounded like, glanced at Ace and waited too. He'd learned to wait when Ace went quiet. Something was coming. Gene stopped the playback. The sudden silence felt heavier than the music had. "All right," Gene said, addressing the room but really talking to Ace. "We need something here. A lead break. Something that sounds like money. Something radio will love. Can you give me that?" It wasn't a question. It was an instruction. Gene Simmons didn't ask. He directed. Ace didn't look up. His fingers moved slowly across the fretboard, not making sound yet. Just feeling the wood, the metal, the space between notes. "Ace," Gene said again, his voice harder. "Did you hear me?" "I heard you," Ace said quietly. His voice was flat. No emotion. No defensiveness. Just acknowledgement. "So? Can you do it?" Ace lifted his head. Looked at Gene for exactly 2 seconds. Then looked back down at his guitar. "Yeah," he said. "I can do it." But he didn't move to the microphone. Didn't plug into the board. Just sat there, guitar across his lap, fingers resting on strings that weren't connected to anything. Ace didn't defend himself. He never did. Gene Simmons was a planner. A strategist. He'd built Kiss on calculation. Every costume choice, every stage move, every promotional appearance was designed for maximum impact. He respected talent, but he valued control more. And Ace Frehley was the one element he couldn't fully control. Not because Ace was rebellious. Not because he argued or fought back. But because Ace simply existed on a different frequency. He showed up. He played. He disappeared. He didn't explain himself. Didn't justify his choices. Didn't perform his genius for anyone's approval. It drove Gene insane. The spaceman persona was perfect for merchandise, perfect for the image. But Gene sometimes wondered if the real Ace, the quiet kid from the Bronx who played guitar like breathing, was being wasted on spectacle when he could be a pure musician. But Kiss wasn't about pure musicianship. Kiss was about the show. Except in this studio, in this moment, with no audience and no cameras, Gene wanted proof. He wanted Ace to deliver on command. To show that beneath the silver makeup and the smoking guitar, there was a professional who could execute a plan. "Ace," Gene said, his patience thinning. "We don't have all day. The label wants this track by Friday. Can you play something or not?" Eddie Kramer cleared his throat. "Gene, maybe give him a minute. He's had a minute. We've all been waiting." Gene turned fully to face Ace. "If you can't come up with something, just say so. We'll bring someone else in. Session guy. Won't be a problem." The studio went very quiet. Peter stopped adjusting his hi-hat. Paul stopped tuning. Eddie's hand hovered over the mixing board, bringing in a session guitarist. The nuclear option. The professional insult that couldn't be taken back. Ace didn't react. Didn't tense. Didn't argue. He just reached over to the cable lying on the floor beside him. Plugged his guitar into the nearby amplifier. Turned the volume knob. Not all the way up. Just enough. Then he looked at Gene again. Still no expression. No anger. No hurt pride. You want to hear it? Ace asked. That's what I've been saying. Ace nodded once. Adjusted his pick between his fingers. Positioned his left hand on the fretboard. Okay, he said quietly. Here. And he played a single chord. Not a progression. Not a riff. Not a solo. One chord. Sustained. Let it ring. The sound filled the studio like liquid metal. It wasn't loud. Ace never needed loud, but it occupied every molecule of air in the room. Harmonics bloomed and decayed in waves. The note bent slightly, just a quarter tone, creating tension without resolution. It hung there, suspended, perfect. Gene Simmons's mouth opened slightly. His arms uncrossed. His entire posture changed. Because that single chord contained everything the song needed. The aggression. The melody. The space for Paul's voice. The foundation for Peter's drums. The attitude that would make radio play it and fans memorize it. It wasn't a chord. It was a statement. Ace let it fade naturally. Didn't add anything. Didn't explain. Just let the sound die and then lowered his guitar back to his lap. The studio was silent. Eddie Kramer was smiling. He'd heard it. He knew what that chord meant. Not just musically, but politically. Ace had just answered Gene's challenge without saying a word. Paul Stanley let out a low whistle. Yeah. That's it. That's the one. Peter nodded. That's money. Gene stood very still. Processing. His brain, always 5 steps ahead, always calculating, was trying to catch up to what his ears had just heard. Subscribe and leave a comment, because some moments only make sense when we remember them together. Play it again, Gene said finally. His voice had changed. Quieter. No command in it. Almost a request. Ace didn't respond immediately. He adjusted his pick again. Plugged back into the board this time so Eddie could capture it properly. Then he played the chord again. Same note. Same bend. Same perfect weight. Gene closed his eyes. Listening. Really listening. When it faded, he opened his eyes and looked at Ace. Where did that come from? Ace shrugged. It was always there. You had that the whole time? While we were talking? Yeah. Why didn't you play it when I first asked? Ace looked at him with those steady, unreadable eyes. You weren't ready to hear it. The room held its breath. It was the most Ace Frehley sentence ever spoken. Not defensive. Not arrogant. Just true. Gene Simmons, who always had a response, who controlled every conversation, who built an empire on never being caught off guard, had nothing to say. Eddie broke the silence. We rolling? Because I want that on tape right now. Yeah, Gene said quietly. Roll it. Away from the spotlight, Ace made a choice no one expected. They recorded the track. Ace built the entire lead section around that single chord, variations, inversions, the same DNA expressed in different forms. He didn't showboat. Didn't add unnecessary notes. Just served the song. When they listened to the playback, Paul was grinning. Peter was nodding along. Eddie was already hearing the mix in his head. Gene sat at the console, arms crossed again, but different now. Less defensive. More contemplative. Ace, he said during a break. Why do you do that? Do what? Wait. Make people think you don't have it. Then pull out exactly what's needed. Ace thought about it for a moment. I don't make people think anything. People think what they want. I just play when it's time to play. But you could show off more. You could prove yourself earlier. Make it easier. Easier for who? Gene didn't answer. I know what I can do. Ace continued, his voice still flat, still emotionless. I don't need to prove it every second. The guitar proves it when it matters. But people underestimate you. Let them. It was that simple to Ace. Let them doubt. Let them question. Let them bring up session guitarists. When the moment came, the music would speak. And music didn't lie. Gene understood strategy. Ace understood truth. They were both right. But only one of them slept well at night. What followed silenced everyone in the room. The album was Destroyer. The song was Detroit Rock City. And that single chord Ace played in the studio that afternoon became the foundation of one of Kiss's most enduring tracks. When the song was released, radio stations played it on repeat. Fans learned every note. Guitar magazines analyzed the solo. Music critics, who often dismissed Kiss as spectacle over substance, had to acknowledge that someone in that band could really play. Ace never mentioned the studio confrontation. Never told the story of Gene's challenge or the session guitarist's threat. Never used it to prove a point or win an argument. Because he didn't need to. The song did that. Years later, after Ace had left Kiss and returned and left again, after the reunions and the feuds and the lawsuits, Gene Simmons was asked in an interview about Ace's guitar playing. Ace's. Gene paused, choosing words carefully. Ace is the most naturally gifted guitarist I've ever worked with. Not the most technical. Not the most trained. But when he plays, you hear something nobody else can give you. I learned that early on. Sometimes you just have to wait for it. The interviewer asked what he meant by wait for it. Gene smiled slightly. You had to be there. In Ace Frehley's home studio, hanging on the wall above his amplifiers, there's a photograph. Black and white. Ace with his Les Paul. Taken during the Destroyer sessions. In the photo, he's looking down at his guitar, fingers on the fretboard, face completely neutral. The photographer had caught him half a second after playing that chord. The one that changed Gene's face. The one that became a song. Ace never titled the photo. Never explained it. It's just there on the wall, a reminder that he doesn't need. The guitar hangs beside it. Same Les Paul. Same strings, replaced 1,000 times. Same voice. Still ready? Still patient. Still waiting for the exact right moment to speak. Share and subscribe. Some stories deserve to be remembered. Ace Frehley didn't shock Gene Simmons with technique. He didn't shock him with speed or complexity or showmanship. He shocked him with inevitability. That single chord was always going to be played. It was always there, waiting. Ace just knew when the room was ready to hear it. That's not genius. That's wisdom. And wisdom doesn't brag. It plays. The legacy of that moment extends beyond one song. Beyond one album. Beyond even one band. Every guitarist who has ever been underestimated carries a piece of that afternoon in record plant. Every musician who has been told to prove it on command knows the weight of that single chord. Every artist who has chosen silence over defense understands what Ace Frehley demonstrated in 1975. Power doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need validation. It doesn't argue its case. It simply exists. And when the moment demands it, power acts. Gene Simmons built an empire on understanding what audiences wanted before they knew they wanted it. He mastered the business of spectacle, the machinery of fame, the architecture of myth. He turned 4 musicians into icons, faces into brands, concerts into experiences that transcended music. But in that studio, facing a quiet man with a Gibson Les Paul, Gene learned something his strategic mind couldn't plan for. You cannot manufacture authenticity. You cannot schedule inspiration. You cannot command the moment when music decides to speak its truth. Ace Frehley taught him that without saying a word. The relationship between Gene and Ace was always complicated. The businessman and the artist. The planner and the mystic. The man who saw 5 moves ahead and the man who simply knew when it was time to play. They clashed. They frustrated each other. They needed each other in ways neither could fully articulate. But they respected each other. And that respect was born in moments like that afternoon, when Gene demanded proof and Ace provided truth instead. Years after Kiss's original lineup fractured, after reunions became business transactions and brotherhood became nostalgia, Paul Stanley said something in an interview that captured it perfectly. Ace never fought for his place in Kiss. He just played. And every time he played, he reminded us why he was irreplaceable. You can hire session musicians. You can find technically better guitarists. But you can't hire whatever it is that Ace has. That's not for sale. It's still not. Ace Frehley continues to play. Smaller venues now. Different configurations. No makeup. No fire. No spectacle beyond the spectacle of a man and his guitar having a conversation only they can understand. And when he plays that chord, the one that shocked Gene, the one that became a legend, the one that proved everything without proving anything, the audience knows they're hearing something real. Not a performance. A truth. In the end, that's what separates icons from legends. Icons are built. Legends simply are. Ace Frehley never built himself into anything. He just showed up. Plugged in. Played. And let the music do what music does when it's not being managed or marketed or manufactured. It tells the truth. And truth doesn't need a strategy. It just needs a moment. And a single chord.